I'm going to introduce you in the same order that is here. So Irene is from CONSOB. CONSOB is the authorities in Italy. Then we have João Vieira, that is from CMVM, the authorities in Portugal. Then we're going to have with us Mykolas from the Bybit team. And then Jakob from the Nordic Blockchain Association. So we are going to have a really great mix of points of view. We have like regulators, I'm going to sit on the corner, regulators, industry, and associations. So, hello. So let's start with pressing challenges. So what would you say, like after MiCAR, of course, and although we are not like finishing with that story because we're seeing or starting to see how it's being implemented at the national level, and also how some of the authorities are implementing like the second level legislation. And now, like looking at the global context, we have seen this wave of new regulations with the Genius and Clarity Act, which are impacting our perspective in our landscape, the regulatory landscape. So what would you say right now is the most pressing issue at the regulatory level?
Okay, it's working. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Well, there are a lot of pressing priorities, of course. Perhaps the one I would like to talk about today is the importance of channeling resources to the real economy. This is something that in CONSOB we are taking care a lot. It's a challenge that we experience every day with blockchain. We are here today talking about this. I mean, how we can ensure that blockchain is really used for what is meant to be a public good. So what we are trying to do in Italy as CONSOB, as market regulator, is really to work together with industry participants, with consumer association, with academics, to make sure that we have a system that is in a way helping resources to be channeled into productive investments. It would be a pity if blockchain is only used as a pure speculation, is just a way to move wealth around. I think history gives us very clear lessons on that. When there was the discovery of Americas, part of Europe believed that wealth was simply mining silver and gold. Well, they were wrong. Simply mining is not making nations wealthier. The wealthier nation comes from value creation, new ideas, solving problems for community. This is something we need to realize if we really want to exploit blockchain for what it is really. Another very pressing issue from our perspective, and is very much connected with that, is striking the right balance across different goals, sometimes competing goals like investor protection, innovation, and market competitiveness. I think we don't have to see these goals as alternatives. I mean, it's not true that if there is investor protection, there is no innovation. If there is investor protection, there is no competitiveness. It's quite the opposite. I mean, if you strike the right balance, if you achieve an appropriate balance, investor protection means more capital, means more market liquidity, means new ideas, new use cases, means channeling resources into the real economy and value creation. So that's our priority, and what we are looking specifically is tokenization, because tokenization, the representation of financial instruments in a public ledger, is a typical example of an initiative that could bring resources to the real economy. And we are working hard in CONSOB to understand and remove the current obstacles to tokenization, and this is something we are very much focusing on today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, first for the invitation and also for the interesting question. There is a lot of concerns, firstly about stablecoins. It is still one topic that is very trending, but there is another more generic topic that is also talked about, that is deregulation. There is a big trend of deregulation, and I think it's not the way. As Irene talked, that there is a problem with interconnection with the real economy, and we need to have regulation to ensure that there are projects that are transparent, that promote the public good. And we saw in the regulation of Web 2 that it had a light approach and it didn't work. We saw that it harmed the common citizen, and that was one of the reasons of our crisis in our democracies, in our beliefs in the policies. We need policies that take into consideration the needs of these common citizens, and MiCAR and crypto assets regulation in general. It's a great opportunity because in the crypto assets market we have direct access to the markets. So a lot of liability is held by the retail investor. So we need to guarantee that there is transparency, that the market is trustworthy, because a lot of that future or of that confidence that the common citizen can have belongs to the work of the regulator. It's not the private sector that is going to have that worries all the time. So we have this main job to do it, and is very important to the future of society. I was very attentive to the last panel, and it was fascinating, and talking about the humanizing of technology, and that's what we are talking about, to be transparent and to guarantee, to ensure that we can have technology that thinks in all citizens, and that it's easy to speak about it, but it's very complex to deal and to guarantee these objectives, as also the last panel talked about it.
Thank you for having us. I work with Bybit as a director of policy, and it's exciting to be here. As just colleagues mentioned, the last panel was really inspiring, talking about how we as a community have an obligation to contribute of blockchain doing not only well but doing good. And I think that's a very important step. But at the same time, I do realize that when we talk about regulation in crypto, it's an arms race, and you know who's going to win: crypto. For a simple reason that crypto is more unified, it has infinite resources, and it has the best talent. But it reminds me of the time back in 2008, 2007, when the best talent went to work for investment banks. For a simple reason, they paid double the salaries, more flexibility, more opportunity. And what we had then, investment bankers didn't lose when markets crashed, regulators didn't lose as well, retail lost. For a simple reason that the industry was creating so many different and difficult products no one could really understand. Markets couldn't follow, rating agencies couldn't properly assess, let alone regulators supervise. So in order to avoid for us getting into the trap of where we were back in 2008, 2007, crypto industry and blockchain communities have to work with the regulators. And the European framework is exceptionally good for providing that. So we have MiCAR, we have MiFID, we have EMI licensing. So those are the opportunities and frameworks work with the regulators so that we avoid creating things that get out of order, so that we ensure that we protect the customers, we put the compliance first, and we safeguard the innovation. And the last thing to make this happen are the communities that, well, Jakob is building in Nordic. So we have communities of blockchain associations that bring the regulators, that bring the institutions, that bring the businesses together so as to avoid us the mistakes that we had some 15 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must admit I've been extremely puzzled what actually to say on this panel, because I think if we take a step back and just like accept that Web 2 regulatory international frameworks from a legal perspective didn't work out. I think you mentioned it, the consumer ended up losing. Now we're talking about Web 3 where we got programmable and we got AI. So I think everyone needs to realize this is something that needs to be fixed. If we take what's going on in Europe, we got MiCAR, we got DAC8, we got CAP, we got a lot of good things that's coming into place, but the way it's implemented from a country perspective, it's totally different. I presume all the exchanges here have tried and talked to the different regulators. Like, the interpretation of the law is not the same. The way it's treated is not the same. So I must admit, I was more puzzled, like, how do we actually fix it, right? Like, we've been so many thought leaders in the room, and I think if we are talking about governance structure, we just heard Cardano, how they've been struggling with the 7 million people just agreeing on something. We're talking about something that's going to reach 8 billion. So I think we need to take a step back and say, how can we actually, as an industry, agree upon a governance structure, right? Like, that's step number one. We haven't decided internally, all the different protocols have their own governance structure. So I think it's taking a step back and say, as the technology provider, as the people building something, we need to be coherent in our governance structure. When that's done, then you can talk about creating some laws. Then afterwards, you can talk about how it's actually implemented. So I think it becomes a little bit, we're fixing fractional things. We're trying to fix MiCAR, which is the capital market, but how is identity handled? Like, so I think it's maybe everyone take a step back and don't think so much about the financial part of it, but think about now it's an internet that's gonna own itself and gonna be programmable. So I think like the key essence here for me is there need to be someone setting a standard for what is good governance, and need to someone to point it right direction. I'm really hoping that's the UN or UNDP. Then everyone building something needs to agree upon it, and then, as you're mentioning, then we need to facilitate that we're talking to the governments and the public elected.
I'm going to try to recap to summarize what were your points, and then I'm going to comment, and then I'm going to make a question on that comment. But Irene, if I understood correctly, you think that the priorities and the focus should be right now, and okay, we have a framework, but now let's see how that applies into the real economy and what is going to be the impact. You are talking also, João, of a really interesting point that is not the deregularization, but actually what we do with the current regulation and how we actually use it for consumer protection, which I will agree also that should be one of the priorities, and I would like to think that was the reason for what we created this regulatory framework. And then Mikkel, you're talking about really interesting points on how this plays on the communities itself, but also how we can use these frameworks as a push for adoption, right? If I understood mostly correctly. And then you are actually taking a step back on saying let's not focus on the financial part. Let's see at the technology general, how the Web3 space is built and it's going to work, rather than just focus of the financials. Mikkel, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, if I may, I think that just adding on what Jakob said, that sometimes we also need to take a step back and look at how the regulation, how the communities, how the technology impacts us, and what do we do with this going forward, and not just as a mere observers of what you mentioned impacting, but actually of our responsibility. And given that we're here at the United Nations, the responsibility is not only to do well, which in crypto many do, but to do good. And I've been traveling to many different conferences and together with Mariana meeting, and when you get to crypto conference, sometimes you get really depressed. Number one is because you hear so much jargon that you struggle to understand and to follow. And two is you also hear that crypto is going to solve all the world's problems. And then you think, okay, you know, I'm not part of this community, I can't understand what's happening, and I don't believe in actually what they say. That sometimes you do get that feeling of depression. But let me assure you, they do it on purpose so that, you know, they feel a little bit superior. Crypto people, they know better and they're going to solve all the world's problems. But in reality, when we talk about blockchain is just a database. And instead of being centrally supervised, it's decentralized. And right now, we still do a lot of things manually. Before, governments did manually. Now on blockchain, we move things and money manually. What will really change the life that we have is when we put automations on top, artificial intelligence on top, the smart contract. And just finishing up on the point that our obligation is that those smart contracts reflect the core values that are put in the constitutions of our democracies. The equality, the integration, the transparency to an extent, inclusion. And those contracts, those smart contracts, where they start executing automatic loans, automatic grants, automatic subsidies, automatic insurance, automatic healthcare, they do have the human compassion. They don't exclude the communities. They ensure the equality. That is the massive wave that's coming, and that's the obligation, not only from the bottom up that we have here with the grassroots, many projects they have, but also the top-down responsibility.
Okay, so we have like a technology now, and the priorities, again, is just like, what is the impact on the real economy? How we do this in a way that is consumer protector? How we actually like clarify it, like, and make it like digestible and like that the products and technology can be used? And at the same time, how we not focus only on the finance part? Sounds like simple, right? Like, will you say then that like all the frameworks we have right now, because we have MiCAR and MiFID for tokenized securities, we have PSD2, almost PSD3, we have like the DAG, like we have like a lot of regulation, but that's only in the financial part. If we start to look like into like beyond the financial part, we have like also DORA, we have right now coming like the one that is just really problematic, the Data Act, which also impacts like a smart contract. So we are like looking beyond just the financial part. Will you say that, and let's focus on Europe because I just mentioned European regulation, do you think that like this set of regulations have been thought with the Web3 space in mind, or this is actually like a set of regulations that we are like trying to copy paste and adapt in somehow, because MiCAR we know is totally literal copy paste from what we have seen traditionally in the ecosystem?
Okay, I go first. Well, it's a tough question, Mariana. From my perspective, well, definitely these regulations are not necessarily aligned with the new concepts and new dynamics in Web3. Negotiation of these pieces of legislation started well ahead of you know, the most recent developments in Web3. What is really challenging, I would say, is that national rules, regional rules, has to cope with truly global markets and has to cope to truly global technology. So we are facing in Europe an issue of institutional complexities, and I think that you from the private sector, you are all experiences the cost for that. And we are experiences also you know, this idea that the code is low, okay, but even low needs check and balances. So if you want mass adoption in blockchain, you cannot expect that people read the code. This is not the case. So I think we should start from, you know, rethinking the rules from these basic considerations. And so, at least in our experience, what we find extremely crucial in this market that is, okay, the technology is neutral, is distributed, but the market is very much concentrated with very few big players. Okay, for these big players we need a unique, united voice in Europe. We need much more pan-European approaches, and this is an example of simplification, you know, like having ESMA supervising the big crypto players. This would be a simplification that would help at the same time investors, because it could higher investor protection, it would avoid fragmentation, the very many different results coming from different interpretation of the law, but at the same time it would save costs for the industry. Another important topic which is very much connected to that is to ensuring some, level playing field at the benefit of our European market players compared to non-European market players. And to achieve that result, we need stricter market assets rule. We cannot continue to admit that unlicensed entities, unlicensed platforms provide services in Europe based on a number of regulatory flows. We need more equivalence, we need more reciprocity, we need more international convergence. I know it's difficult, but there are a number of tools. Maybe if there is time, I can talk about it later, but we need more stricter market access rule. And the last thing is cybersecurity audit. As I mentioned, not everybody reads code. So if you want to attract investors, if you want to attract users, if you want mass adoption, you need independent audits. When it comes to these topics, we basically publish a position paper together with our sister authorities, the French IMF and the Austrian FMA, because we really believe these are priorities in Europe if we want blockchain to be adopted. On tokenization, we have the experience with the DLT pilot regime, that is an experimentation allowing market infrastructures to use DLT and derogate where necessary to some pieces of legislation, which proved to be promising, but unfortunately it's not very attractive. It's not attractive because it has very strict cap size limits, thresholds that we need to remove or make more flexible. And most important thing is that it's a temporary regime, but nobody invests in something that is just temporary. Anybody would invest only if you see a return from the investments. So we need to move from a temporary experimental approach to something permanent, going hands in hands with wholesale digital currencies, because this is the only way to address systemic risks.
I will also
these are the top, which is different from, you know, retail digital currencies.
But I will also say that like
this is also very important.
Pilot regime came way too early. Like I think that like if pilot regime will like come like a couple of years later, the level of adoption and the liquidity that was invested in it will happen different. But that's a different conversation.
I mean, what just a very quick remark on what you are saying. Actually, what we are experiencing right now is that we are, in a way, we are trapped in a sort of chicken and egg issue. Issuers will like more liquidity, investors will like more use cases and mass adoption. So it's like, a loop. We need to break up this loop, and I think this is the role also of policymakers, of regulators. I mean, if there are externalities, positive externalities that can be gained, we should do something to help them come out.
Yeah, I think just again, I want to take a step back, and maybe I just don't get what's going on. Maybe I don't get the framework, but I mean, there's so many different approaches we're trying to do, especially in the EU, and no one stopped up and said we actually got a lot of regulatory frameworks in place. And if you look at the issues as tech transparent, we already got regulatory frameworks in place, right? Why are we trying to invent something that's relevant just for vertical instead of step back and say what actually changed? We're just going to do things online. That means what is the real things we need to solve? It's digital identity, digital ownership, and I think it keeps on going down to vertical solutions. And we can do, I don't know how many regulatory framework for different verticals, but we're always going to be too late. So I mean, if we don't stop and pause a little bit and say, what is it actually that's changed? That's the online interaction instead of MiCAR. I mean, we're gonna solve something way too late. So I'm getting a little bit, because I'm part of working group with ministries, I'm part of all these different things, and it's just a lot of lawyers saying a lot of things that takes a long time. So I think it's really, as an ecosystem, it's stepping back and saying what actually changed. We are now doing things online, right? Like, let's define those things before we take old mindset and say, let's do a financial regulatory framework and sandbox. So I think we're just like actually rushing into things. That's what probably make the whole process a lot slower.
I actually need to respectfully disagree. Because I don't think that we did it faster. MiCAR took really long time. I mean, we were discussing it for at least 5 or 6 years, and this was not an isolated process. This was a process that was done also in consultations with the industry. Within ADPA at the time, we put together a reply to some of the questions.
The financial industry?
No, this is absolutely everyone that was member at the time of INADPA, which has also non-financial institutions could participate. Blockchain for Europe did also consultations, like the UCI, there was even academic universities participating in these responses, so there was opportunity to participate. Now, if I will need to be completely transparent and honest, I don't believe that MiCAR is perfect, but I think that it's a good intent, and I will go back to the panel of last, the previous panel. Fred was talking about the Constitution. I was there, I was part of the process, and I also saw and witnessed the first quadratic voting on the Treasury of Cardano, which failed, and they needed to just redo it. But these are experimentation, and it's a trial run route. We had MiCAR right now working for less than a year, most likely, less than a year actually. And we are starting to discuss, and especially looking at what is happening at the at the US with the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, is what things did we got right, and what things might need to be open and rediscussed with the industry. What I must say is that I do believe that regulation breaks the bubble of adoption, because it brings a level of fake or not security in the head of the user, because at least there is certain controls, and MiCAR doesn't enter to regulate everything. DeFi, for the same reasons that you're pointed out, they was completely left out of the regulation because the regulator thought it is too early at the adoption level to even try to regulate it, so let's see what happened. But this is my Mariana position. Maybe João, you also coming from a national jurisdiction, can contribute a little bit.
I agree partially with Jakob. I still think MiCAR is a piece of the puzzle and an important one, but it still needs a lot of connection with other legal acts. Also talking about other panels, in the morning we saw a project of farmers, so we have that experience of blockchain helping traditional industries. So, and I said deregulation is not the best approach, but maybe we need to think in another way of regulation. For instance, we have the financial markets regulation that wants information, and more information. We need to provide simplistic and understandable information for citizens, and that feel that their work, that their industry is being helped by this regulation, by finance, by crypto assets markets that are also connected. You have crypto assets related to these projects that are at stake in these projects. So there is a connection, and so it's important to, as regulators, to see that connection and to ensure that the retail investors also understand it. And speaking in the elephant of the room that Irene spoke, that asthma and central supervision can be important to have a more simpler way and one interpretation of the law, but we still have very complex issues to deal with, and a lot of national traditions, but we have to be bold about it. And so we need some level of centralization, but with all the national efforts also in place. and the national institutions also have to take part of it. They have an important role in it, and we need also coordination between the institutions of different areas. That's the point. It's a puzzle, and that Data Act, Digital Markets Act, is AI Act, is everything. It's everyone is seeing in a fragmented way, and we need more coordination about it.
Agree. Before giving it to you, because I was just notified that we have 5 minutes, let's go for the wish list. So coming from the industry, what will you actually ask to the regulator? Like if you could ask something, and then from you guys, well, which advice will you give to those entrepreneurs that are going into jurisdictions and trying to get licenses with you?
I think it's important to state it's not that I don't like MiCAR and what's going on. It's just not ambitious enough. It's really not grasping the reality of what's going on with the technology that's coming. So positive that part, I just think it needs to be a lot more proactive here. And then I think it's for me, it's not the regulatory people, it's not the people working in the ministry. They're extremely technology interested, at least in the Nordic region. I think more it's a public sentiment from the public elected to understand the reality. And that's why I just want to state that we got the opportunity to set good governance standards. Like what we're doing here is showcasing what blockchain and technology can be used for. So I'm positive for what's going on. I just think we're way behind on the reality check that we actually need.
I will agree with that, but I also am really happy that we have not get the eyes of the regulator in some of those issues, because it allows the innovations to actually experiment and go wild, rather than if they get the attention on those points and then we start to get massive regulation on those areas. Mikkel?
Yeah, I would actually agree with you. First of all, the fact that we're all sitting here, the communities, industry, regulators, and having this in-depth conversation, I think it's already of great value for everyone, including, I would imagine, including the European framework, but also the global. From the European perspective, and I 100% would agree with what Irene mentioned, there are several very, very important elements there. For Europe to remain competitive, and I understand UNDP is not just about Europe, but for Europe to remain competitive, several things have to be put in place. One is we have to make sure that whoever functions and works, provides services in Europe, they follow the rules. So those who are not compliant with MiCAR, they should be compliant, and we should all be making sure that they don't come here unless they obey the rules, because Europe has been developing rules for thousands of years, and those rules have to be respected. Number two, again, super important, that the blockchain money, so we buy Bitcoin, we spend euros, it's on blockchain, it leaves the economy. How do we take the money from blockchain back to the real economy? And tokenization is the answer, which means if I tokenize my house, the asset ownership goes on blockchain, but the money comes down to the real economy. So we get liquidity back to the real economy, whether we tokenize art, cars, factories, shares, bonds, but the money flows back to the real economy, and that is very important. And the third element, which we heard, and I'm sorry, I'm acting almost as Italian ambassador here, but I truly believe in what you said, and I'm almost sorry that we got licensed from Austria, not from Italy. But in joking apart, the things that you mentioned about central supervision, and there's a huge fight behind the closed doors, which I'm not going to talk much about, but crypto industries, companies fighting between each other really heavily in discussing whether we need a central supervision in Europe. And for simple reason, some crypto companies get licenses in smaller countries, some in bigger countries, but there is arbitrage in where you get the license. And to explain, Italy, Austria, and France came out and said, you know what, it's enough, let's make a central supervision, let's integrate European capital markets, let's make unified, high standard rules, and let's ensure that everybody follows with the central supervision in ESMA in Paris. 100% agree with that. And this is the way we have to go. In Europe, we have to obey the rules, we have to protect the customers, we have to respect the laws, and we have to have one common standard across entire Europe. And I think that is the only way forward for European markets to function and to ensure that we have the innovation forward. So thank you.
I start? Okay. Well, my suggestion for innovators would be to really exploit the best of blockchain. I mean, what really enables blockchain is crowd-generated innovation. So my suggestion is really to be consistent with this. Avoid the monopoly or quasi-monopolistic market we are, experiencing in Web2. Web3 should be something different. So that's my first wish. The second one, and is very much connected with that, is that blockchain offers opportunities for programmability, automation. Well, start to think about compliance by design, transparency, auditability, accountability. All this can be programmed into the code. So please do it. And my third wish is please stop with DeFi washing, tech washing. I mean, crypto will not save the world. Use blockchain when it is needed and prove why it is needed. Don't pretend it's gonna, be useful for everything. This is not the case. Thank you.
I think they were great, those wishes. Just one more for you to be transparent with the regulator, because we still have a lot of questions. You also have still a lot of questions, and so to be open with each other would be, there are still a lot of business models that we still don't know how to frame it, and to have an open approach to it, and sharing ideas about it, like in this forum, would be the best way for it.
And I think that the fact that we have two regulators sitting with us here with the industry, like, also prove you how open the regulators in many different European countries are for you to approach them and talk to them and discuss it, right? I will just echo a lot of the different wishes that you made. I completely agree, borderline, like that we tend to look at technology in silos, and that might be a mistake. But I think that we also need to also experiment at the regulatory level, because the last that I would like to see is a copy-paste of what we have for a traditional financial regulation into the crypto space. And I don't think that we're going to get it right at the first. This was a nice effort. And I was like thinking in something after you, Mikkel, and it was just like basically, yeah, right, like this is like European values, right? And it just reminded me like some discussions that I have in the US yesterday, this week. And we were like talking like, yeah, so the US has an idea, China builds that, and then Europe regulated, right? Like we are famous for that like regulatory mindset, but I would like to say, and I like to see that Europe is not the only one that is actually regulated. We have like a lot of regulation coming out from the US. We have like Singapore actually like just changed the regulatory regime as well. So we are all going into this direction. So I think that this is also like creating a more interesting space for those good players that want to be compliant and provide good services for the users. I hope that the regulatory panel was like interesting to all of you, and I think I need to cut it there, right? Okay, thank you guys.